The final 4 clans for the upcoming V-Clan collection have been revealed, and they are pretty surprising, yet within the borders of what we were expecting.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another Cardfight update, and today we are finally going over the final reveals or the pre-reveals for the V-Clan collection, so we can finally understand what Volume 3 and Volume 4 are going to bring to the table. We have a gist of what these cards are going to do for their respective clans, and now the player base can start speculating what the actual specifications of these skills are and potentially prepare for the reveals of the actual skills, so we can immediately start deck building and theory crafting once these cards get revealed in, I presume, 1 or 2 months going down the line. But that said, let's take a look at these final 4 clans as we got the card reveals for MegaConley, Paladin, Norakami, and of course Angel Feathers. And we start off with MegaConley, and for MegaConley we've got Master Beetle as well as a couple of other generic support cards, and they once again bring the paralyzed mechanic of MegaConley to a newer level. Because if we take a look at the Grade 1, we've got Brilliant Blister, and this Grade 1 has a skill description: if your opponent has no stand units, you can return this unit to your hand and draw a card. It has super powerful skills to stop your opponent's rearguard attacks before they can be declared. So this in itself tells us that it has 2 skills. It has some type of bounce mechanic which gives us card advantage, which is actually really good because it allows us to use this card aggressively while at the same time also defensively, because it doesn't necessarily specify when the timing is for this skill to bounce back, but there are ways for MegaConley to forcefully rest your opponent's units, so that could potentially help to increase the consistency of this card. But more importantly, having the option to stop your opponent's attacks before they can even be declared can be very powerful, as MegaConley did have cards that were similar to this in the past. So I think this is either going to be something you can place on the Guardian and stun one of your opponent's units, or maybe at the beginning of the attack step you can use this card to maybe stop one of your opponent's rear guards dead in their track. So I think this is going to be a very annoying and powerful card to deal with, so this is going to be very fun. But then if we move up to the Grade 2, we've got a questionable Grade 2, as we've got Machining Armor Beetle, and this Grade 2 has the skill description: paralyze an opponent's rear guard. It also has an interruption skill that seals off intercept and boost. Now, for anybody that isn't aware what paralyze means, it basically means you arrest your opponent's units and they cannot stand for the next stand phase, so they stay rest for an extra turn. Overall, this isn't anything new. We've seen these skills before on other Grade 2s for MegaConley, as well as the blocking of intercept and boosting. It is a nice skill because it basically eliminates a lot of value on your opponent's board. But we had cards that already did this and they didn't really saw a lot of play. So if this card doesn't gain power or does something more proactive, this card might not really make the cut, but we have to wait and see if there's more to this card than just meets the eye. But then if we take a look at the main Grade 3, we've got Martial Arts Mutant Master Beetle, and this Grade 3 has the skill description: paralyze multiple opponents' rear guards and steal their power. So this is probably going to be a very powerful unit. Then, increase this unit's drive count depending on the number of either player's rest units. So we're probably going to have a massive Vanguard or Rearguard, depending on this skill is also useful on Rearguard. But then on a Vanguard, it can potentially also have multiple drive checks. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that for one extra Rearguard that's rested, you get 1 extra drive check. It might be something like for every 2, or maybe there's like, you get 1 if there's 3, you get another 1 if there's 5, and you get another 1 if there's 7, something like that. But the great thing is that your opponent cannot necessarily play around this skill completely, because it also counts your rear guard. So at the very least, if your opponent is playing around the multiple drive checks, you can just call field, rest them while attacking, and then attack with the Vanguard last, so you can have a extra couple of drive check on your Vanguard attack. So overall, more stunning, more paralyzing, more pressure. I think this is going to be very solid, but the problem is with MegaConley, it's hard to see what the actual value of these cards are going to be with just the skill description. We have to see what these cards are going to do with the actual skills before we can make a better judgment, because MegaConley as a clan is always very tricky in this way how card advantage and value within skills is seen, because their skills are very unorthodox in contrast to other clans. So we have to wait and see if Master Beetle is somewhat on the same level of Giraffa, but it could be a nice addition for the Giraffa engine, as it's going to be very damn annoying. Now, moving on to the second clan, we've got the fan favorites, as we've got the reveals for Paladin. And of course, these are new Revenger support with the inclusion of Revenger Raging Fall, Dragon Reverse. So let's take a look at these new Revengers and see what they have in store for us. So first off, we've got a brand new grade 1, which is Self-Control Revenger Rakia, and his skill description reads as, when rode upon by a Revenger, search your deck for a Revenger and call it from your deck as a rearguard. It has a powerful skill to help increase the number of allies. So this is actually very useful because this gives you a +1 depending on what type of restrictions and cost it has, if it's going to be very useful or not. But overall, just having a +1 is a very decent, and you can then call grade 2 potentially, and that grade 2 can potentially extend into more. You can have a Masquerade, which can search for Blessed Dark if you want to go the more Dread Phantom route. So there are definitely a lot of combos here. Now, potentially it can also search out grade 3s. There aren't really good grade 3 rearguards with the Revenger name, at least in standard. Maybe in premium there's more, but this is overall not that bad. And if its skill, because it also states that it has a powerful skill to increase the number of allies, if that is another skill which works on the rearguard circle, and you can call more card if it's called to the field, this could combo very nicely with Raging Form during the multi-tech shenanigans to flood the board with more Revengers, so you can restand potentially another time. So Rakia, potentially very good. But then if we move up to the grade 2, we've got Overcoming Revenger Rukia, and Rukia has the skill description, when rode upon by a Revenger, search your deck for a Revenger and add it to your hand. So this is similar to the grade 1, only the grade 1 calls to the field, and this one gets it to hand. This is insanely powerful just by the sheer fact you get it to hand, because now you will always have a Raging Form Dragon in your hand. So you will always have a target for Raging Form Dragon to superiorite, which is kind of ridiculous. So this increases the consistency of that engine. If you can ride this on grade 2 and you can ride Raging Form on top of it, you will always have a target for Raging Form Dragon because you just fetch it to your hand while you do it. So this is incredibly good for that engine to make it more consistent. But on top of that, it also states, powers up if you have a grade 1 Revenger on the field, a great combo piece with Rukia. So this is probably going to be more powered in field. It says combos with Rukia, but it also says just a grade 1 Revenger, so it can come and synergize with any type of unit on the field. But overall, just its ride skill, or when rode upon skill, is kind of ridiculous for Raging Form Dragon in general. So yeah, this is probably going to be a very good 4 of grade 2 for the Revenger archetype, at least for a while. And then we also got the new Raging Form, which is of course Revenger Raging Fall Dragon Reverse, and its skill description reads as, you can perform multiple attacks while powering up by locking your rearguards, ride it through the skill of Revenger Raging Form Dragon, and sink your opponent into the abyss with continuous chain of attacks. This is exactly what we were expecting, a card that synergizes with Raging Form Dragon, that will promote more multi-tech because he himself is Raging Form Dragon. There isn't really a lot to talk about this besides that this is what we expected of the card. Now we have to wait what the specifications are. It's probably going to lock something and then probably then call more units or maybe superiorite again or something like that. It's going to be good. It's going to be strong. I'm very curious what this is going to be, and it's probably even going to be playable in premium, but we have to wait and see until we get the actual skills specifications. Now, moving on, we've also got new Norakami reveals, and surprisingly enough, it's not Vowing Saber Reverse. It's Dungeree. Yes, we got Dungeree support, and also a heads up, Dungeree already got built-in support in Norakami because Norakami already got self-binding effects with the initial Vanquisher support, because Vanquisher also binds your own card from hand and has cards that synergize with that. So I think Dungeree can definitely benefit from that support and can potentially be a solid engine straight out of this set without needing more support, but we have to wait and see to the actual skill reveals. In the meantime, let's take a look at these new cards and see what their skill description read, so we have a better understanding what Dungeree himself brings to the table. So first up, we've got a brand new grade 1, which is Exorcist Mage Mew Mew, and her skill description reads as, when rode upon, you can increase the amount of cards in your bind zone while manipulating the top card of your deck. She also has a skill to draw a card by binding a card from your hand. So deck manipulation like Oracle Think Tank, more bind acceleration while also having more cycle because you can bind and draw cards. This is probably going to be very generic and very good in general. Can even be used potentially for Vanquisher depending, because this can synergize well the multi-tackers from Vanquisher. So overall, this is probably going to be very decent and helps the Dungeree engine to just set up its plays and to immediately start rolling straight out the gates. Now, if you move up to the grade 2, we've got Exorcist Mage Renren, and its skill description reads as, when rode upon, you can increase the amount of cards in your hand and bind zone. He has a skill to bind cards directly from your deck and then strengthen himself itself based on their grade. So this is more card advantage while setting up your engine, and it can also filter your deck, which is going to be very interesting. This doesn't synergize with the multi-tech cards because they specifically need to be bound from hand to call them to the field, but at the same time this can definitely help Dungeree and filter out cards that you don't really need anymore. And depending on what Dungeree does, this can set up your future plays, because I assume that Dungeree might call cards from the binds into the field or something like that. So this is a nice card to set up that play right from the gate. And then finally we've got Dungeree himself, which is Sealed Demon Dragon Dungeree, and his skill description reads as a godly dragon with unknown powers, but that power has been sealed. Use the cards in your bind zone as food and unleash his sealed power. So this can mean anything. This can either mean that you need to use your cards in your bind zone for cost to activate a skill like its original counterpart, which basically sent a bound card back to the deck to retire one of your opponent's units. I don't think that's going to be the case because that's very weak. This probably can mean one of two things. You either going to send multiple cards from the bind zone back to the deck or the drop zone to unleash a very powerful skill, or it's going to be somewhat similar to Mystery Flare, that it counts the amount of cards in your bind zone, not necessarily grades, but cards in your bind zone to unleash specific skills that the card might possess. So it might have a skill that activates if you have 2 cards in your bind zone, and then one if you have 3 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, something like that. I think that is potentially the direction they can take Dungeree in, because it doesn't really give us more, but because it specifically says food, I think you're going to use the cards in your bind zone and then send them somewhere else because you just use it. He just ate those cards to empower himself. So I think it's more that direction than actually just stacking up cards in your bind zone in the first place. But we have to wait and see, because at this point it's all just pure speculation. Now moving on to the final reveals, we've got Angel Feathers, and surprise surprise, we've got Ramiel Reverse. So we've got more Celestial support, and this works very nicely with the previous Celestial support wave, as it literally just upgrades that deck, because we can see that immediately in the new grade 1, which is Nursing Celestial Narwhal, and Narwhal has a skill description: set up the Celestial cards in your damage zone. She supports the Celestial gimmick. So for anybody that isn't aware with the Celestial mechanic, it basically works around your damage zone having the exact same cards that are on the field, and by doing that you can restand those units. So you want to set up your damage zone accordingly, so you have the correct cards in your damage zone that you're going to call to the field, so they will benefit from your Hamiel's effect. And having a way to set up your damage zone is going to be very important, so this grade 1 is probably going to be very important. But then if we move up to the grade 2, we've got Emergency Celestial Danielle, and Danielle has a skill description. She has a skill, when placed, to call a unit from your deck with the same name as a card in your damage zone. Again, very perfect, because you want to have the same cards on the field that are in your damage zone, so being able to just superior call them from your deck directly is going to be very good. So this is probably going to be a very good card for the Celestial deck, which also synergizes with the grade 1 because it also has the Celestial name. And then finally, we've got, of course, the new Ramiel Reverse, as we've got Cleanup Celestial Ramiel Reverse. And her skill description reads as, similarly to Prophecy Celestial Ramiel, she shows her true value when there are more cards in your damage zone that share names with your rear guards. She can force your opponent to make a tough decision when she attacks. So this works probably very nicely with Ramiel because it has the same type of mechanic, but the actual payout is going to be different, because the original Ramiel, restand your units, draw some cards, give power to the field. This is going to be something else. What this tough decision is, we don't know. Does it mean your opponent has to make a choice to either that you gain power but you get a guard restrict, or you don't get the power but you draw a lot of cards or get crits or something like that? We don't know. It's probably going to be very obnoxious. It's probably going to be very powerful. But the fact that it has the same strategy and the same mechanic, that's actually very useful, because that means you don't necessarily punish yourself or hurt yourself by riding into one or the other, because you do the same setup anyways. So this is going to be very nice, because you can just change them whenever you want. Either you can make a deck only with this version of Ramiel or the other version with them both, and you don't mind which you're going to ride on your first grade 3 turn or your follow-up turns. So this just brings more consistency to the deck, more options, potentially more powerful finishers. So I'm very curious of what direction they're going to take this, and how strong this new Ramiel build or this new Celestial deck is going to be straight out of Clan Collection Volume 3 and Volume 4. But with that said, that's all the reveals that we got. These are also the final reveals that we got for V Clan Collection. Now we just have to sit back, relax, and wait a couple of weeks, maybe a month or two before we can see the actual skills and actually start losing our shit when we can nod over these reveals and that they're gonna be glorious, amazing, disappointing, or very awesome, depending on how the skills work out, which clans you're waiting for or excited for, and which clans you're dreading for their reveals. So a lot of awesome things on the horizon, but I'm very curious what you guys think of these new reveals, so let me know in the comments down below which new clan or card or archetype you're excited for that just got new support and their card reveals. Let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, this video has been brought to you by lovely Patreons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a patron today. But with that said, I've missed a time leap, and I see you guys in the next one!